If you've got anxiety attacks or panic attacks and you're looking for a proven way to overcome them, then you're definitely in the right place. Hi, my name is Ty Hicks, founder of Mental Health Coaching, and I got to tell you, I'm really glad you are here. And I'm not going to waste your time with some long intro. We're just going to go ahead and get right into it. So, as you can see, the title of today's presentation is Free from Panic and Anxiety Attacks in 90 Days, the method 612 people have used when therapy, medications, and coping mechanisms failed them, all by identifying the hidden game your subconscious keeps playing and rewriting the rules. Now, firstly, I just want to say if I heard someone claim, that panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and the underlying core anxiety causing them could be overcome in 90 days, if I would have heard that back when I was struggling with my own anxiety, I would not have believed it for a second. I would have thought to myself, there's absolutely no way. This is probably total BS. How in the world can this guy claim that something I've been struggling with for years could be overcome in just 90 days? And I just want to point out, if you're skeptical, I really totally get it. I do. After all, you're probably in a position where you've tried just about every damn thing you can think of to deal with the anxiety already. And you have maybe no clue, who I am, how this process works, what the results of it are. So, of course, it would sound unbelievable. Totally makes sense. I want to tell you right away, though, I do have the proof that this works. So, for starters, I used to have extreme anxiety for years to the point that I would get hysterical. And the method I'll be teaching you today helped me finally overcome my anxiety when therapy, medication, and coping mechanisms didn't work. I ended up getting hospitalized. I was suicidal. I was medicated. I was in therapy for years. None of that stuff worked, but this method did. And I used to have those main issues, and now I don't. Additionally, in the past 8 years of doing this professionally, I've had 612 clients that I've worked with one-on-one. And what we do is we survey them before they use the method that I'm going to teach you today to assess how severe their anxiety is before starting. And then we also survey them after they've finished implementing our system. And the typical minimum result that they report is a reduction in the anxiety severity and frequency by about 75%. Okay, so most clients do much better than the 75% reduction. It's just that the 75% is sort of the minimum that our typical client will experience when they use this system I'm going to be sharing with you today. So, not only do we eliminate the anxiety and the panic attacks when we work with a client, it's just also that, usually we're also able to, within 90 days, reduce the overall anxiety that somebody's experiencing by at least 75%. Usually we can get the anxiety attacks and the panic attacks dealt with in the first 30 days or so. Everyone's a little different. Okay, now if that sounds unbelievable, I will really just want to invite you. You can go to our website anytime you want. You can see that we've got 241 documented case studies as of the recording of this video, and testimonials where people describe their experience right in their own words. You can listen to the interviews. And also, we've maintained online a 5-star rating for 8 years online as well, as long as I've been doing this, professionally. And the results this method produces are all completely transparent, unlike any other company out there assisting people with their mental health. So you can always just go to ty-hicks.com/testimonies anytime you want. And you can see the literal words that people have said, direct screenshots of the messages of them, telling us what's going on, their written reviews, and also their video testimonials where they describe it. Okay. And while we have countless documented, proven case studies of the method I'm going to show you today working for all types of anxiety, what's really cool is that panic attacks and anxiety attacks are some of the most common types of problems that our clients come to us to have us solve for them, which is really, really neat. And today I'm going to show you, why it is that panic and anxiety attacks tend to come back, why they feel so exhausting, and why everything you've tried so far has probably failed. And most importantly, I'm going to show you the new proven way to get rid of them for once and for all that is working incredibly well for people like you. And the reason is the truth you really want to understand is that if you're dealing with panic attacks, if you're dealing with anxiety attacks, I need you to really know it's not because you're broken. It's because you've probably been following a system that was actually never designed to solve the problem in the first place. Okay, so let's dive in and talk about exactly how to do that. Now, first off, who is this for? Just so you know that you're definitely in the right place. Well, firstly, this is for anybody who's struggling with panic attacks, anxiety attacks, the kind that seem to hit out of nowhere and leave you feeling like you're losing control. It could also be that, maybe you've tried therapy, medication, breathing techniques, distraction strategies. Maybe some of that stuff has helped a little bit, but none of it has ever really been enough to truly end the cycle. And then, this is also for you if you constantly feel like you're on edge, waiting for the next attack to hit. You find yourself getting anxious about getting anxious. That's always fun, right? If you feel like, a racing heart, a tight chest, or dizziness, it just makes your brain scream, like, what if something's wrong? And suddenly you're spiraling. Okay. Also, this is for you if you've avoided driving, social events, or even just leaving the house, all because you're afraid of having another attack out in public. And what you've probably also experienced too is maybe you've been Googling your symptoms, right? Knowing deep down the Googling's not going to help, but still feeling compelled to do it because you just are trying to feel safe again in whatever way you possibly can, right? And if that's you, I really just want you to know, I want you to know I see you, I get you, I've been there. I really know, exactly how serious that situation is. And today we are going to answer the most important question for overcoming your panic and or your anxiety. Okay. Now you may not know that it's the most important question, right? But it is absolutely the most important question for us making sure that we can actually overcome the panic and anxiety. So here's really the most important question. How do we stop trying to respond to the surface level symptoms of the panic and the anxiety and finally eliminate it at the source? Okay, that's the really important question. Now, if you have panic or anxiety attacks, you already know that your mind continuously has these automatic negative thoughts that are totally involuntary, and you probably waste a ton of time and energy constantly reacting to those automatic thoughts, right? Trying to prevent them from spiraling into a full blown attack. And so the entire idea behind a coping mechanism, which is usually what we're taught, is to be able to respond to those anxious thoughts in a way that brings some kind of relief. But think about it for a second. If you knew how to finally address the true source of the anxiety or the panic, where your mind is no longer automatically generating those anxious thoughts to begin with, well, you'd basically have no more limitations on being able to live the life that you want to live, right? I mean, you would basically have no more need for the coping mechanisms either. It would just go away. So I want to make sure that we get you that answer and that clarity today, but I also want to take it a step further. Not just how do we do this, not just how do we, stop trying to respond to the surface level symptoms and instead get the mind to think how we want it to by default. And not just how do we do this in 90 days or less, but also how do we do it in a really simple, easy, common sense, and proven way that's really going to last for you. Okay. How do we do this without you having to rely on, band-aid solutions, like medication where you trade one unwanted feeling for an unwanted side effect? How do we do this without you feeling like you're just sitting in a room with a therapist talking about the same stuff over and over, waiting endlessly to be given some clarity, to be given a real plan, when instead it just feels like you're spinning your wheels, at least that's how I felt. How do we do this without, having you do something completely bizarre and like a total Hail Mary, like hypnosis or energy work or acupuncture or any of those other crazy things you see out in the world that, hey, I mean, I'm sure they do provide some value, but let's be honest, they're really not dealing with the source of the problem. And how do we do this without exerting a lot of effort, like using some crazy exposure therapy system, might have you do? That's the real question that we're going to answer today. So now, in case you're, thinking this is not possible to do, I just want to take a quick second to introduce myself because it 1000% totally is. And it's usually people's belief that they can't get better that keeps them from getting better, even though they deserve to. So, firstly, as I mentioned before, my name is Ty Hicks. I'm the founder of Mental Health Coaching. And I want you to understand, that I once had debilitating anxiety like you, and it got me to a point where I was like suicidal. I was in a psych hospital after my suicide plan got interrupted by family. I was there for almost 2 weeks. And that's when, I got thrown into therapy. I got put on medication for years. I really tried every single thing I could to get better. I really wanted to get better through those traditional mechanisms. It just didn't work. And it was only once I really developed the process I'm going to be teaching you today that I finally overcame the anxiety, right? Not just managed it, not just coped with it, but overcame it. And I've since stayed anxiety free for over 15 years, right? All without any medication, therapy, or relying on any coping mechanisms whatsoever, which is really cool. And, don't get me wrong, my life's not perfect. I'm still human. I have the occasional negative thought or feeling here or there, but the difference is that I no longer have repetitive, limiting anxiety, right? Like I no longer have what we call capital A anxiety, if that makes sense. Just the normal stuff you're supposed to have, like feeling a little worried when a car almost hits me in traffic, But even then, it only lasts a few seconds, and then I feel calm again right afterwards. Okay. And as I said a second ago, right, over the past 8 years, right, I've helped 612 clients use the process I'm about to share with you right now to overcome their anxiety too. And, kind of cool process as well is that I even taught this to Olympic athlete Abby Napton to help her overcome her performance anxiety and land a spot on the diving team of Team USA for the Olympics, which was really cool. She happened to be referred to me from a previous client. It took us about 9 weeks to do that. Now, because our process is working better than anything else out there, I've gotten a lot of copycats over the years, but almost no one gets it right. And what I'm going to do is show you today really the fastest and the most effective way to get this done. Now, before I dig fully into that, I really think it's my responsibility for us to quickly talk about what doesn't work for panic and anxiety, because really 90% of what's being taught out there in the mental health industry just simply does not work. It takes way too long. People keep trying it for years, and they have no clue that there is a much simpler, easier, proven alternative available that's working so much better. And I want to cover this with you because there's just so many ads out there. There's so much content out there. There's so many people trying to rope you into one strategy or another. And I really don't think I'd be doing my job as an industry leader if I didn't make it really clear to you, what works and what doesn't. So let's talk about what's been happening in the industry, in the mental health industry and what's been going on. Well, in the past couple of years, there's really three things that have happened that I think are absolutely ruining people's mental health. And I'm sure you've probably seen some of this. So, first, the rate of prescriptions being thrown at anxious people has never been higher, right? So, ever since the COVID pandemic, more and more people are getting prescribed anti-anxiety medication, even though the results of those medications have never, ever been lower. In fact, my recent quote here from Behavioral Health Business is that antidepressant prescriptions increased by approximately 21% from 2019 to 2022, with a notable rise in telehealth prescriptions from 1.5% to 31.4%. And that trend has continued ever since, where doctors and psychiatrists are gathering even less information than they did before and giving people prescriptions faster than they ever have. A recent peer-reviewed medical meta-study, which is the highest caliber of academic medical research there is, found that, quote, there is no conclusive evidence that low serotonin levels cause depression or anxiety. Despite the popularity of the serotonin theory, research suggests no significant difference in serotonin activity between those with and without depression or anxiety. The quote goes on to say, the chemical imbalance theory was heavily promoted by pharmaceutical companies in the 1990s to market SSRIs, even though studies now show that SSRIs do not correct a serotonin imbalance. And the final quote from this study out of the University of College London is clinical trials have demonstrated that antidepressants, SSRIs, are often barely distinguishable from placebos in terms of effectiveness. Okay, now this is some of the most recent research that's been put out a handful of years ago in 2022 by the University of College London. However, even more research has shown that the serotonin theory is not supported by scientific evidence and should no longer be presented as a factual explanation of depression or anxiety, end quote. That's from Molecular Psychiatry. And furthermore, quote, SSRIs and similar treatments only have any kind of positive effect in about 50% of patients, and only 25% of patients achieve full symptom relief. That's from Science Daily. So even though all of this has been re-proven in the early 2020s, it was actually proven previously back in 2015 and even as early as 2005 that the source of anxiety and panic is not biochemical at all. So back in 2015, one pair of researchers found that, quote, the FDA had accepted aspirational language that the drugs, quote, help to restore the brain's chemical imbalance and bring serotonin levels closer to normal, even though both claims were and remain scientifically meaningless. There is no such thing as a scientifically established correct balance of serotonin. So let me be very clear, right? This has been proven, reproven in 2022, 2015, 2005, that this whole biochemical imbalance theory is a myth. It was a myth that came about in the late 70s and really pushed in the 80s. It was never proven. And so a lot of times when I share this information with people, people get upset, with their doctors and psychiatrists. But I want to make it very, very clear. I don't blame the doctors and psychiatrists for prescribing this stuff, even though, as the statistics show, 75% of people find it to not be a viable solution. And I don't want you to get mad at your doctors because doctors and psychiatrists largely do three things. Okay. So, firstly, what they do is they try to help their patients feel better with whatever tools they have available. Number two, they recommend things that other doctors are doing to try to help their own patients. And number three, they keep recommending what they are used to recommending. So here's what one psychiatrist had to say about this when they were interviewed by researchers about this idea that the whole biochemical imbalance thing was just a myth that had basically been sold to the public. So in this public interview, psychiatrist Daniel Carlott, he said, quote, we don't know how the medications actually work in the brain. I'll often say something like the way Zoloft works is it increases the level of serotonin in your brain, and presumably the reason you're depressed or anxious is that you have some sort of a deficiency. And I say that not because I really believe it, but because I know the evidence really isn't there for us to understand the mechanism. I think I say that because patients want to know something. And they want to know that as physicians, we have some basic understanding of what we're doing when we're prescribing medications. They certainly don't want to know that a psychiatrist essentially has no idea how these medications work. Okay, that was a direct quote from Science Daily. So, in short, doctors are doing what doctors are trained to do, right? They diagnose and they prescribe medication. They don't know how to actually really get to the root of the subconscious problem. It's not their expertise and specialty. It just really isn't. They just look at anxiety as if it's the same as diabetes or heart disease, and it's not. It just is not. You cannot medicate it away. They prescribe drugs because they're trying to use any tool in their tool belt that might produce results. But remember, the bottom line is that according to Science Daily, right, SSRIs and similar treatments are only somewhat effective in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief. So that leaves the remaining 75% of the population a little bit hung out to dry, and no one knows this. Patients with anxiety or panic, they simply assume that their doctors are giving them a solution to their anxiety when they get a prescription. They have no clue that it is statistically very likely to help that much or even at all. And it's almost certainly not going to help solve the problem, right? Not only that, right, but medical research has now linked anti-anxiety medication with an increased chance of developing all sorts of scary stuff, right? Like Alzheimer's, cardiovascular issues, cognitive impairment, dementia. Not even to mention the really scary stuff, right? Like serotonin syndrome and tardive dyskinesia. I've had some clients who've come to me who had to quit their anti-anxiety medication after 10, 20, 30 years, and they were starting to develop real issues with their nervous system. It became a big problem. And that's not even to mention also the physical dependence, right? And the need to slowly taper off of it. So, what I want to point out is that what you may have been doing without realizing it is doing this phenomenon that we call playing the pharmaceutical lottery. right? People like yourself who are just well-intentioned people, they just want to feel relief. They think that they really should just do whatever the doctor recommends and that they will find the quote right medication cocktail eventually, right? And this does work for some people, but most people, 75%, will waste months or years tweaking their dosages and prescriptions only to get very small improvements in the results. And the real question that comes up for me here is like, why in the world would we ingest something into our body for years and years that isn't even solving the real problem? It was a myth that it was going to really solve the problem in the first place. It was never proven, gives us weird side effects. Most doctors agree you won't be able to take it forever anyway. And it literally causes your body to have a physical addiction to it. It just does not make any sense, right? Now, to be 100% clear, right, I am absolutely in no way recommending that you alter your prescription, that you flush your pills down the drain, don't go to your medicine cabinet and do a raid, okay? Even for the clients that I work with to help get to the real root of the anxiety or the panic issue, I always tell them right at the very beginning, right? Like we have to deal with the real root of the problem first, and then we can work with your doctor to responsibly wean you off your medication so that you don't experience a complication due to a withdrawal. Okay. So, in no way should you go, oh, all right, well, it's not going to be the real solver of the problem. So, let me just throw them out the window. Don't do that. Don't stop taking your prescribed medication and don't start weaning off of it until you've actually taken the steps necessary to address the real problem, or else you will make things much, much worse. Okay. But I just want you to know I'm sharing all this, data with you because I want you to know that if you have been trying to solve your anxiety or panic problem with medication and it hasn't worked, that doesn't mean that you're defective, right? It means that you are a part of the 75% of the population the medication is insufficient for. And in no way is that your fault. So, medication is leaving people high and dry. It certainly did for me. So, what other options is the mental health industry providing for people these days, right? So, this medication boon is one of three major changes that's been happening in recent years. The second thing that's been happening is a lot of people very naturally are continuing to turn to some form of talk therapy. And, therapy is by far the oldest method out there for trying to deal with anxiety. It was literally created in the late 1800s. And what most people don't realize is that in some ways, a lot of ways actually, it really hasn't changed all that much since then. I mean, it really is a truly ancient methodology. Now, a lot of people have had a lot of hope in therapy recently, even if they had bad results in the past, because on the surface, it seems like there are a lot of new methods and approaches out there, but that really has to do more with innovation in marketing methods, not innovation in the core method that's being used. Okay. So, one big thing that we're seeing in the industry right now is that there are these big companies that have made talk therapy more accessible through telehealth, like Talkspace, BetterHelp. Some of them now are even offering like these AI therapists, right? Which is kind of baffling. And on top of that, in the past 20 or so years, there have been very slight variations of the talk therapy model that have popped up, things like DBT, EMDR, hypnotherapy, and the like. Okay, so a lot of people believe that these variations might be the missing link that have really kept them from anxiety recovery. But interestingly, when you look at the data, the overwhelming amount of people are just not finding talk therapy or these other variations to be sufficient. So, according to the National Health Service in England, quote, despite the widespread use of talk therapy, improvement rates for anxiety remain below 50%, indicating the need for more comprehensive treatment options. And according to the National Institute for Mental Health, quote, many patients report feeling they have plateaued with talk therapy after several months, with dissatisfaction stemming from its inability to address the root cause of anxiety, particularly in more severe cases like panic attacks, anxiety attacks. Patients often report that while talk therapy helps them cope, it doesn't provide the tools necessary to fully overcome their anxiety. End quote. Okay, so in the 8 years of my professional career, one interesting thing that's happened is I've done about 21,000 hours of documented consulting and coaching with people who have severe anxiety or panic. And well over 75% of the people I've spoken with report that therapy has been somewhat helpful, but is far from sufficient to provide them lasting relief from anxiety. And so, one thing to understand is some people do find therapy very helpful. But there is a substantial portion of the population who never find therapy to be sufficient. Especially for panic attacks and anxiety attacks, talk therapy is notoriously insufficient. So why in the world are people, not getting results? Like what's going on here? Well, what most people with panic and anxiety attacks don't know is that there are two key things that keep therapists from being able to truly help some of their patients experience lasting relief. Even though the therapists themselves truly care deeply about their patients, they really want what's best for them. And it's really neither the therapist's fault nor the patient's fault. It's just that the entire system has some major limits baked into it that keep it from working for everyone. So the first major limitation is what we refer to as the broken patient myth. So therapists are trained that panic and anxiety attacks are part of a lifelong condition that cannot be overcome. Now, mind you, this theory is over 200 years old, right? The basis of classifying anxiety or panic as a permanent disorder was like Sigmund Freud's work back in the 1880s. Just to kind of give you some context, right? At the time he came up with the theory that anxiety was an unchangeable disorder, cigarettes were literally being prescribed to treat asthma. Bloodletting was still being used as a medical practice, and lobotomies were rising in popularity, right? So they didn't exactly have it all figured out back then. Now, of course, therapists today don't do things exactly like Freud did back then, but there are certain assumptions that are still held on to today that have been passed on through the academic literature for decades and decades and decades. And one of the big ones is that anxiety is largely unchangeable by the patient or the therapist. And that means that every single thing that these therapists are taught in school is based on the premise that your patient will never really recover, but you can help them feel a little bit better, right? In other words, you can help them learn how to cope through indefinite therapy. So the key thing to understand here, right, is like they're given a belief system, and that belief system sort of creates a box. The box is you're never going to help your patient overcome the anxiety or the panic, but you can help them. And so all of a sudden now the patient and the therapist are both locked into this box. And so every other tool or piece of advice that the therapist has operates inside of that box. So when a patient is wanting to overcome anxiety and panic attacks, they think the therapist has the answer that lies outside of that box when they don't realize that the therapist themselves is operating within the box of a lifetime of coping the entire time. So it's just this major misguided set of expectations. Okay. Now, the key thing here to kind of think of metaphorically is imagine for a second that your car is not working properly, right? Like you're trying to drive it from A to B and it unpredictably like loses control. It swerves dangerously and wildly, right? Now, would you ever want to hire a mechanic to work on your car who did not know how to fix it, who was never trained how to fix it, who only was ever trained to kind of fix it? I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't, right? No matter how nice they were, how much they wanted my car to be fixed. And this was one of the big things that caused me to realize I had to find additional answers beyond my therapy. One day I just asked my therapist, like, hey, what is the plan to overcome this? And he literally point blank told me, like, oh, there is no plan, right? You just keep coming to therapy indefinitely, and we keep talking about it. And I was not content with that. So I just want you to understand there is a big mismatch there between patients and therapists. Now, the second big thing that keeps people with panic and anxiety attacks from getting good results in therapy is the non-directive principle. So Freud's entire theory, right, was that if you just simply sat someone down and let them talk and talk and talk, and if the therapist did not intervene with any direction or advice, that the patient would eventually arrive at new conclusions on their own and work through their issues. So this was literally what was referred to as the talking cure and is still referred to that way to this day. And therapists built onto this idea over the years. Carl Rogers, he built on this idea in the 1950s with his mandate to all therapists to simply hold unconditional positive regard for their patients. And his basic idea was just hold space for them, don't judge them, care for them. And if you do that for a long enough period of time, the changes will occur. So even though today's therapists, modern therapists do offer some advice, it almost never really goes beyond their standard set of go-to tips and tricks that only offer mild coping at best. So I'm curious if you've ever heard, a therapist say some things like this. Let me teach you a breathing exercise you can do. Have you tried meditation? Make sure you use your box breathing. Let's try some tapping. You really shouldn't focus on things that you can't control. Um, but beyond that, therapists are literally taught in school to, quote, be like a mirror, reflecting the patient's thoughts and feelings back to them for further exploration. And that's why you've probably heard things from a therapist like, well, how does that make you feel? Or tell me more about that many times before. And in most cases, with panic and anxiety attacks, the therapist is really likely to push you to utilize medication because they know they don't have any approach that's really going to cut it. And the real bottom line is that there is just a major mismatch between patient and therapist expectations on what the purpose of therapy is. Patients usually want a plan. They want a roadmap to recovery and feeling normal again, but no therapist is trained in how to provide their patients with a true roadmap for lasting recovery. Therapists are taught that no such plan exists, and they are only ever trained in how to help a patient embrace a lifetime of coping. So that's a major problem. Now, patients believe that their therapists have the plan or that some therapist out there somewhere must have a plan, but the truth is there is no plan. The therapists have never been taught a plan. In fact, the therapist believes that you have the plan hidden somewhere inside of you. And the only plan is for you to keep coming to therapy and to keep talking with the hope that eventually and almost accidentally you're going to feel better. Okay. And I want to be totally clear here. This whole non directive approach does work for some people with some issues. This can be very helpful for processing grief or, some forms of isolated trauma. A portion of the population is able, to feel sufficient results from the talk therapy. But as we saw in as recorded in 2024, less than 49% of people reported experiencing sufficiently positive results according to the NHS. And that leaves over half of the population who are suffering hung out to dry. Isn't that a little alarming? And the people who keep trying it, who don't get very far, they think it's their fault, or they think it's a matter of mismatched personalities, or the relief is going to come eventually. But if so few people are getting satisfactory results, why in the world are so many people staying in therapy for years on end? There's really three main reasons people stick with therapy. The first one is it seems free, right? It is, quote, free or seemingly low cost, even though you end up spending countless hours there and years of your life wasted, endlessly about the issue without solving it. People forget that there is a dollar amount that your time is worth, right? Like how much is an hour of your time worth to you, right? So you add that up over time, even if your insurance is covering it, there is absolutely a cost. Number two, it's all the client knows how to do. It's all the patient knows how to do is go to therapy usually. And it seems better to do something rather than nothing. After all, at least getting to talk to somebody once a week feels kind of good. So there's kind of that little tiny dopamine hit that kind of keeps you hooked and coming back, even though it's not going to be sufficient. And then third, the client or patient really keeps hoping that at some point the breakthrough is going to come, that they're holding out hope that this is all part of the therapist's plan, right? That there's some plan the therapist has that they're guiding you through when they're actually not. So again, imagine your car is broken down. It's not functioning properly. It's swerving violently. You can't get from A to B, so you go to the mechanic. Mechanic tells you, well, your car's never going to function fully the same way again. But I tell you what, you keep bringing your car back to my shop every week and we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll figure out how you can fix it yourself, or if we talk about it for a few years, I can give you a couple things to kind of fix it. And some people do start to feel better about their broken cars after a while of coming in here for a long time, so it might be helpful for you too. Oh, and you know what? Don't even worry because your car insurance is going to cover it. I mean, does that sound like a good plan? I don't think so, because at the end of the day, your car is still not functioning, right? The problem is not solved. And the two major limitations of the broken patient myth and the non-directive principle were why I deliberately chose not to become a therapist and to find my own way to help people get the kind of recovery that I had achieved. A lot of people ask me, like, well, don't you have to go to school for this? I mean, yeah, you got to go to school if what you want to learn is how to help somebody only cope for the rest of their life, then yeah, go to school and get that degree. That's fine if that's what you want to do. But I was obsessed with figuring out a way to help people actually overcome this. And there is no degree for that. There is no schooling for that. I had to come up with the method myself, and I was my own guinea pig for a long time till I figured it out. But I do want to just point out and be very, very explicitly clear, right? I am absolutely not coming after therapists here. The vast majority of therapists are incredibly caring, intelligent people. They're just doing what they've been trained to do. Many of them are my colleagues and friends. And many of them, frankly, come to me for advice with their patients, right? They don't know how to, get beyond the coping process. And a lot of them are very effective at helping a portion of the population deal with certain issues. But I see their struggle and frustration in trying to help a portion of people that they are just not trained on how to deal with. It's really, really frustrating. So it's not their fault. They don't know how to help you. And more importantly, it's not your fault that the whole process is just not getting you what you really want. You know what I mean? So if you've tried therapy and you found it somewhat valuable, but far from sufficient to deal with your panic or anxiety attacks, you're not alone. Okay. Data shows that 51% of people are just like you. Okay. Now, the third thing that's been happening in the industry that I think is really leading people down the wrong path, it is fascinating, but it's leading people down the wrong path, is people are naturally turning to answers on the internet, right? So if you're anything like I was when my anxiety was at its peak, if you've already tried therapy and medication and those didn't really work well for you, you've probably tried to solve the panic and anxiety problem yourself, right? So especially in the past 10 years or so, people are trying to be their own therapist or their own, mental health coach by turning to the vast abyss of the internet for answers. And, if you're like most people with substantial panic or anxiety attacks, most of your time on the internet is probably spent in the following three chunks, right? First, compulsively Googling the potential meanings behind every sensation in your body. And once you find the worst possible explanation for what you're feeling, your mind latches onto it, refuses to let go. You go down a click hole looking for proof that you do know, in fact, have the biggest disease out there and that you're unshakingly convinced that you've got some major, major issue. So that's a big problem. The second one is we usually will spend time doom scrolling, right, through funny, distracting, meaningless posts or games, really just to help your mind temporarily be distracted from the looming fear of disease or uncertainty or another attack popping up again. And third, you probably spend some portion of time on the internet looking for real, tangible answers on how to finally feel better. But you probably only end up finding cheesy surface level content that makes you feel good for an instant or that makes you feel seen or validated, maybe. But after months and months of consuming it, your life looks exactly the same. So your social media feeds, in fact, are probably littered with all sorts of this like motivational pump up, feel good social media posts. I mean, mental health influencers, so to speak, are a dime a dozen. And do you know why they have become so common and popular? It's because firstly, there's two main things. First, so many people are struggling emotionally, and the type of content that they engage with is content that simply validates how they currently feel. So it's incredibly easy to just put up this super easy to compose type of content, and it's gotten so watered down, and everyone is doing it, right? So have you ever seen a post like this before? In today's world of constant stimulation, it's inevitable that you will feel overwhelmed. It's not your fault that the world is designed to make you feel anxious. It's okay to not be okay. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. And if they do, it's time to say goodbye. This is a friendly reminder to take a breath, be kind to yourself, and send positive energy out into the world. You ever seen a post like that? Of course you have, because they all sound like this. And do you know why? This post is strategically crafted not to give you a true step-by-step system for recovery. It is designed to get you to click the like button. It validates how you already feel without giving you any real way to address the root of your problem. Either that, or you'll see a post like this one. Here's 10 signs that you might actually have XYZ exceptionally rare condition you've never heard of. Number one, you feel tired when you wake up in the morning. Number two, you feel hungry multiple times a day, especially after several hours between meals. Number three, you often feel stressed when thinking about day-to-day responsibilities. Number four, you disagree with others from time to time. I mean, hell, this type of content is what's causing more and more people to self-diagnose themselves when the person who created the content and frankly the person consuming it just don't know what they're doing, and it leads them astray. 1 in 4 Americans have self-diagnosed a mental health disorder based on information from social media platforms, TikTok being the biggest one out of them, okay, according to a study done in 2023. It's probably even more since then. And it's causing people to believe that they know what their real problem is when they actually have no clue, and neither does the person posting the content. So I consult with people all the time, right? With panic attacks, anxiety attacks, when they're through the roof, and they'll come in with some theory. They'll say like, "Yeah, I really know what I really need to do is I just need to heal my inner child, or I really just need to calm my parasympathetic nervous system." And I have to remind them, I care for them deeply and I want them to have I want them to have the mental health they deserve. But I have to remind them, if they knew what the real problem was and how to solve it, they would not have the problem anymore, right? The fact that they have the problem still is evidence that there is at least one or more blind spots as to what the real, true underlying problem is. So these people are very often just enthusiastically running in the wrong direction, right? And I don't blame them. I mean, it's human nature to look for answers, but mental health influencers are taking advantage of that, and it drives me bananas. The reason your feeds are littered with this stuff is because influencers know that the vast majority of anxious content consumers are far more interested in just feeling understood. And they are craving to have an explanation of what their problem is. So that's why they craft these posts. But I got to tell you, the people who continue to prioritize consuming validation-based information over transformation-based information are the ones who stay stuck. I've seen it firsthand. I've been in the industry for 8 years now, and there's people who just think that they're changing their life or they're gonna find the answer one day by looking on Instagram reels. And that's just not where it's going to come from. They confuse information that makes them feel good for a few minutes with the information needed to create lasting recovery. And they are completely, totally two different things. So let me be very clear as well. I'm not knocking all mental health influencers. They are just doing what they're incentivized to do. They create content that gets massive engagement. It drives up their following so that way they can sell ad space, or they can sell their little, $7 workbook widget that's not going to help anybody do anything except feel slightly good for 2 minutes a day. It's not going to result in lasting transformation. And that's why it's very easy to put out content out there that's validating and makes people feel good when you have no skill set or expertise in how to actually help them deal with complex issues like anxiety or panic attacks. And these people only really teach band-aids and not how to address the root of the problem. It's a big reason, by the way, why my team and I have strategically not focused on building a massive social media following. Hell, I could put red meat out there all day long if I wanted to, if what I cared about was my own following. But instead, the priority we've always had internally is ruthlessly doubling down on making sure client success is through the roof and refining the method every single year so it gets more and more and more effective. So there's nothing wrong, with like eating some candy every once in a while that just makes you feel good for a few moments. But eventually you've got to get your vegetables if you want to be healthy and prevent disease. You need to get to the real root of the problem. The willingness to go beyond the surface level and address the root problem, that's what separates the people who merely want to recover but never do from the people who absolutely do recover and live an anxiety and panic-free life. Okay. So here's the real question, right? We need to ask ourselves, if our goal is to simply retrain the brain to stop having automatic anxious thoughts in the first place, why don't we forget all of this other garbage and just go ahead and do that as quickly as possible, right? So, what is the method that works when these other things are leaving people high and dry? Well, if you're really serious about not just managing your panic or anxiety attacks, but learning how to overcome them, then there is one simple concept that you really got to understand. And this key concept is what enabled me to finally overcome my own anxiety, stay anxiety free for so long. And I've never seen an exception to this with the 612 client successes that we've had. So, the first key concept you got to understand is what we refer to as the formula for peace of mind. And I know that that sounds a little silly. It might sound like I'm exaggerating here. It might sound like, okay, guy, whatever. You're going to tell me what the formula for peace of mind is. Seriously, you got it all figured out. Okay, but it's just a simple little metaphor. Bear with me. Try it on for size. I'm keeping it simple to make it easy for you to be able to apply into your daily life. Okay. So the formula for peace of mind, it has been and has always proven to me, it's when your current life conditions, okay, what that means is how your life is currently, right this minute, when your current life conditions matches up with your subconscious rules for life. Okay, that's when you will feel peace of mind. And I don't want you to just take my word for this either. I want you to just verify if this formula is true by looking at your own life experience. So just try this on for a second. In your life, there's probably one area where you are generally satisfied, right? Could be your health, could be your finances, could be your business, could be your marriage, could be your relationship with your kids, or at least one of your kids, maybe, right? Now, not everybody is fully satisfied in every area of life, especially if anxiety or panic is a problem for you. But we all tend to have at least one area that we are pretty satisfied with. So hell, it could even be like the house or neighborhood you live in. Okay, don't overthink it. So ask yourself, like, what is one area in your life that you feel generally at peace with? So I'll use a real example here. I had a client a little while ago who had severe panic attacks and anxiety attacks. Her name was Sydney, and Sydney has shared her story publicly. She's done a public interview with us. She's given us her blessing to talk about her situation. And when I asked her what an area of life was that she was generally pleased with, she said, my marriage. I love my relationship with my husband very much. And I said, great. What do you love about your relationship with your husband? And she said, well, we spend a lot of time together. We laugh together. He's super supportive and kind. He's been there for me through a lot of ups and downs. And I said, cool, that's awesome. Now, imagine for a second that he was not there reliably. Let's say, that all of a sudden he was off doing his own thing. You guys didn't spend much time together anymore. Imagine if, next time something bad happened in your life, he kind of disappeared. He wasn't really present. He wasn't really there for you. Imagine if you guys basically, stopped laughing together. You stopped, having funny moments. If those changes took place, do you think that that would start to make you feel anxious? And, she said, yeah, absolutely. And the reason why, Sydney would feel anxious if those things changed is because Sydney's subconscious rules for a wife and husband relationship are that, my husband should laugh with me. My husband should want to spend a good amount of time with me. My husband should stick by me when things are tough. And those rules had become a big part of Sydney's subconscious beliefs because of her own past experiences, probably a lot of them from, her childhood. And that's all a rule is, by the way. It's a subconscious belief about what must happen, what has to happen. So, because this area of Sydney's life matched up with her subconscious rules, she felt happy. She felt happy about her relationship with her husband. She did not feel any anxiety or unrest around her relationship with him. She didn't spend a lot of time in her head thinking about it. But you can absolutely bet if these core subconscious expectations were not met, that it would cause Sydney anxiety. Right? Her mind would be ruminating about her husband all the time. She'd be having thoughts like, why doesn't he spend time with me? Or why doesn't he support me? Or even as bad as, is there something wrong with me? And so on, right? If her subconscious rules were not being met, and she didn't make any changes with her husband or make any changes to her subconscious rules, the anxiety would become more and more consuming as her mind tries to find a way to balance the formula, right? So we can either change our life to match up with our rules, or we can find a way to rewire our subconscious rules to more adequately match up with our regular life. Those are the only two ways to create peace of mind. Does that make sense? So if you look at the things you have anxious thoughts about, let's look at the things you have anxious thoughts about. It's probably, not just probably, it is because there is an unmet set of subconscious rules. I promise you. I promise you. Now, they are probably totally subconscious, meaning that you are unaware of what they are, just like Sydney was unaware of her subconscious rules, but they are there. Okay, so more on that in a second. Now, what I was able to do is show Sydney why she was so pleased with her relationship with her husband. But when we took a look at the anxiety and the panic that Sydney was dealing with, it became really clear that there was a different set of subconscious rules that were not matching up with how her life was currently. So she told me about how she would feel sensations in her body consistently and that she would want to know exactly what they meant. She told me that, whenever she was in an environment that she couldn't control, her mind would involuntarily imagine the worst possible scenario taking place in the immediately near future. She told me that as soon as she would feel even slightly nervous, she would immediately imagine having a panic attack before it happened, and that the act of vividly imagining it usually caused them to occur. She told me that anytime something didn't go according to plan or surprised her, it could cause her to panic. She told me that she kept scanning herself constantly to make sure that everything was okay. And what I helped Sydney do was uncover what her subconscious rules were that were causing her the anxious thoughts in the first place. Okay, so through a unique process that we've developed over the years, we uncovered that some of Sydney's subconscious rules were: I should know with 100% certainty what is going on in my body at all times. In addition, I should be in control of what happens in my environment at all times. In addition to that one, I should know with 100% certainty that I will be okay if I go and do an activity. And finally, I should never be surprised. Things should always go how I plan them. Okay, so can you relate to any of these beliefs? These probably are not, things that you say to yourself out loud, but they probably are some of the things that you believe, that you feel very certain about deep, deep down. And again, that's what makes them subconscious. But you probably never known that they were there because they're in your subconscious. And subconscious rules, this is the thing no one knows. No one teaches us this in grade school, although they should. Subconscious rules are the most powerful things driving your every thought and emotion, but we are all completely unaware of what they are. It's like we're all like, it's almost like we have this sort of like automatic software program that we all are running, but we don't even know what the software is, and we're not trained in how to update it. So this means that Sydney had, like we all do, a set of subconscious rules about what had to happen in order to live life. So in order to go to work, leave the house, go to the store, etc., those rules had to be met. And if they weren't met, she couldn't really function very well. So the rules she had for her marriage were being followed. So she felt peace of mind when it came to her marriage. But then when it came to the rules she had for, being able to go out and about, be around other people, deal with uncertain situations, those rules were not being met anymore. And so she felt anxious, especially in those scenarios. So what I had to teach Sydney how to do in order for her to overcome the panic attacks, the anxiety attacks, was what every person who truly wants to do so has to learn. There's one key thing that's got to be learned, and that is how to rewrite the rules of the subconscious game that your mind is playing to make it winnable. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we're just going to take this idea that we've been working with for a few minutes and take it one layer deeper. Okay, so I want you to imagine for a second that you are playing a board game for the very first time. So in order to play the board game, you simply need to know two things. Number one, the goals of the game. Number two, the rules of the game. And if you follow the rules on how to accomplish the goals of the game, you win. If you fail to follow the rules and you do not accomplish the goals of the game, you lose. Pretty simple. So, what if I told you that in a metaphorical sense, you have been subconsciously playing your own game of life according to a simple set of rules ever since you were a child? And more so than that, every moment of your life, your subconscious is trying to win that game. Okay, that becomes really challenging. And when you feel like you are winning, you feel happy and you have zero anxious thoughts. When you feel like you are losing, you experience anxiety. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a deeper look at this and return to Sydney to show you how this works. So for Sydney, within a couple hours, I helped her uncover all of her anxiety causing subconscious beliefs. And I'm just going to kind of give you a fraction of them, kind of water it down a little bit just so you can see kind of the core that's really important. And what we found out was that before she was experiencing anxiety and panic, because it hadn't been in her life forever, before she was experiencing anxiety, her old subconscious values were the following. It was love number one, growth number two, and success number three. So, in essence, you could think of these as being like the goals of the game. Okay. And so the rule book for her game of life was basically this: love is the most important thing. As long as I have love in my life, life is good. Growth is the second most important thing. And so long as I am being loved by others and others are loving me, and I'm loving them, I feel energized and I feel able to grow. I want to be making progress each day towards my goals. And while love is the most important thing and growth is the second most important thing, I also need to make sure I am making progress in my career. As long as those three things are there, life is good. So she developed those beliefs over the course of her life, right? Just like we all develop our value structure throughout the course of our life. And some of it she adopted from the role model of her parents. Some she took from the culture she grew up in, from her spiritual beliefs, her education, some from mentors and friends and boyfriends and things like that. And just like it happens for all of us, her belief system formed over time as she made tons of subconscious decisions about what was truly important to her and what was not important to her. So you see, if you put all of our rules together, what you get is a model of how the world should be, right? And when life equals our subconscious model of how the world should be, which basically just means our rule book, our subconscious rule book, we feel happy, we feel peaceful. And when life does not match up with our subconscious model of how the world should be, when life does not match up with our rule book, for a moment, if it doesn't match up for a moment, we feel frustrated or we might feel sad. When we feel like life substantially and consistently does not match up with our subconscious model of how the world should be, that's when we start feeling the sensation of anxiety as our mind struggles to figure out how to get those two match. And when we conclude that life will never match our subconscious model of how the world should be, that's usually when we start feeling things like depressed. Okay. And that's really it. Okay. That is it. That's where all anxiety and depression comes from. 612 successful client anxiety recoveries later. And I have never seen an exception to this. And for a very long time, Sydney was a normal, happy woman with no anxiety. Why? Because the set of rules was pretty easy to get to match up with reality. She was the one in charge of being able to win her own game, and the rules were just really simple and easy. But then something happened to Sydney that happens to every person who experiences anxiety. Without her realizing it, her subconscious rules changed. For her, it happened in response to what we call a significant emotional event. So, if I remember correctly, for her, it was a bad reaction to some marijuana, actually, where she just didn't really feel in control of how her body felt. And now, what Sydney didn't realize was that when that significant emotional event happened, her subconscious was literally rewiring itself. Because after all, the subconscious's number one priority is to keep you alive, not keep you happy. So what happened was Sydney's values changed into the following. Number one, 100% certainty. And then she had rules for what had to happen in order for her to feel 100% certainty. One of those, I said earlier, was I should know with 100% certainty what is going on in my body at all times. I should know with 100% certainty that I will be comfortable if I go and do an activity. I should never be surprised. Things should always go how I plan them. So now, rather than, love being at the top of her values list, the number one priority for her nervous system is I got to be certain. I got to be totally, completely certain. Okay. And the second highest priority was control. So it was basically I got to be certain, then I can feel control. And to feel control, I not only have to have all those rules for certainty met, I should also be in control of what happens in my environment at all times. Okay. And then beyond control, I need to feel calm. So I can only feel calm if I feel certain and control. And for me to feel calm, in addition to those things previously listed, I also need to make sure I never have a negative thought or worry ever. Okay. And then we can worry about love and growth and success, 4, 5, and 6. So her whole rule book for life changed over the course of a day or two, right? Her whole rule book went from I just want to have love and growth and success to now it was my number one priority is I have to be 100% certain that I'm healthy, safe, and comfortable, and I cannot function or focus on anything else, let alone things like love, growth, or success, until I am 100% certain that I am okay. Therefore, every sensation has to be accounted for. Every possible scenario has to be prepared for. I also have to feel control, and if I don't feel certain and in control, I cannot feel calm. If I don't feel calm, I cannot focus on love, growth, and success. And I will focus on those properly only once I establish the certainty, which will make me feel in control and calm again. Until I feel certain, in control, and calm, everything else has to wait. So I'm curious if you can kind of relate to the belief shifts in Sydney's story. More than likely you can, because people with anxiety and panic tend to do the same sort of thing where they're just chasing after certainty and calm, and almost everything else in their life basically goes on hold. They kind of put it lower on the list in terms of what is on their mind, right? Now, I want to ask you, what do you think is the likelihood that Sydney is going to be able to consistently have her life match up with those new rules? That she will be able to be 100% certain in all situations? That she will be able to control everything happening around her? Well, basically about 0%, right? So before the significant emotional event, Sydney felt peace of mind because her subconscious game of life was winnable. In fact, she felt that she was winning at it almost every day. But when the event occurred and her brain rewired itself, the literal priorities of her nervous system became different without her awareness or her permission. Now her mind was compulsively trying to get a whole set of rules to be followed that were just never going to be followed consistently. And unfortunately, as a result of her mind requiring things that were never going to happen in order to function or focus on anything else, her mind continuously felt anxious, right? So it's a lot like this. Imagine I sat you down in a chair and I made you play a board game, right? You cannot leave from your chair until you win the game. You must try your hardest to win. But the only way you can win is if a whole series of things that are outside of your control and that violate the laws of nature take place. Could you see how anxiety inducing that would be? That's really all a panic attack is, basically, right? So you see, anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. That's really all it is. And the more your subconscious believes that it must have what you cannot have, the more panic you are going to feel. So for Sydney, her brain was perpetually going, I have to be totally 100% certain. Ooh, but I can't. Ooh, but I have to. But I can't. But I have to. But I can't. But I have to. And that spiraling process of constantly trying to feel certain of things you cannot be certain of and trying to control things you cannot control is what creates a panic or anxiety attack. So when we have a set of subconscious rules wired into our mind that are unwinnable, we end up chasing our own tails inside of our mind perpetually. And that creates the lack of being able to function. Okay. And let me make a point that is really, really critical to understand because sometimes people get the wrong idea. It is absolutely not enough to acknowledge that you have unrealistic expectations. Okay. And I learned this the hard way because I thought awareness was just enough with some of my early clients, and it didn't work that way. Every person with panic or anxiety attacks knows that they have unrealistic expectations. They know they try to control things they can't control. They know they try to be certain of things they can't be certain of. They know they have unrealistic expectations of what they should be able to control and what they should let go of. But they also just feel that they can't let it go. Why is that? Why? It's because these rules are hardwired into the subconscious. So knowing that you shouldn't be governed by the rules is never enough to actually make the change last. So, in other words, the reason you are feeling panicked is because your subconscious is wired to require something that you cannot have in order to feel safe. And that means that until you rewire the subconscious to no longer require its unmeetable set of rules to be followed in order to feel safe, you will always have panic or anxiety. Okay. But once you do rewire the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and you train it to feel safe, even in environments that you cannot fully control, the anxiety disappears, the panic disappears. Okay. And the thing to understand here, right, is if all it took was becoming aware that we shouldn't compulsively do something to change, then there would be no drug addiction in the world. There'd be no overeating. There'd be no anxiety in the world, right? We must retrain the subconscious to operate differently by default. It's not enough to know that that we need to think differently. We have to train the brain to think differently. And there's two main ways to do that. One is through a significant emotional event. That's one way our brain gets rewired. The other way is through a short, prolonged period of conditioning mechanisms. So that's, say over the course of 90 days, which we'll talk more about here in just a sec. Okay, so that's the really key thing that we got to do in order to retrain it. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I've only shared, some of the most important parts of uh, Sydney's subconscious rules that she had, but there really were dozens of others that were causing her anxiety. It always takes a couple of hours to map out all of them. We do have to find each and every subconscious rule that is specific to each person, or else it's pretty inevitable that the anxiety or panic will return in the long run. And what I've found over the years is that while each individual has their own variations, there really are only 7 core types of anxiety in the world. So, for some people, their rules revolve around things like, I must be perfect or else I am not good enough. For some, it's I must please others or else I am not good enough. For others, it's I must take care of other people's problems or else I'm not good enough. For people with panic and anxiety attacks, the core subconscious belief system usually is something revolving around this idea of I must be certain of things that I cannot be certain of, or else I cannot feel peace, and I must control things that I cannot control, or else I cannot feel peace. Okay. So again, let me remind you that anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. That's it. So another way of saying that is that all panic and anxiety comes from your subconscious being trained to believe that unless it gets something that it cannot have, it cannot feel peace. And that means that until you identify the subconscious rules your mind is operating by and rewrite them, the anxiety will always occur. But once you do uncover the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and you rewire your mind to follow a new set of obtainable rules automatically, then the anxiety disappears. Okay. Or at least it's only ever always worked. Okay. Whenever I've taught other people how to do it. Okay. So if our job is to rewrite the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by, are we going to, make that happen by talking every week for hours on end about your childhood, your triggers, your feelings? Are we going to get that by, screwing with the chemicals in your brain and numbing yourself? Are we going to get that by just allowing the anxiety to exist and let it pass by, like mindfulness and DBT training would recommend? Are we going to get that by just trying to white knuckle it, and do a bunch of exposure therapy? Is that going to work? Are we going to do this by being able to just trying to jam as much positive thinking as we can into our head and positive journaling every day and doing our affirmations? Are we going to do this by meditating every day, journaling about our feelings? Or are we going to, do this by doing any of the other silly things like sucking on hard candy, box breathing, cutting out caffeine. Okay. No, we're not going to, because every single one of these strategies is simply a way to respond to the brain's automatic negative thoughts. But remember this, okay? The only way to get the anxious thoughts to disappear is to rewrite the unwinnable rules in the subconscious. So you see, when Sydney's subconscious believes I have to be 100% certain and in control that or else something bad is going to happen. That belief of I have to be totally in control, think of that like being like the trunk of a tree. Okay. Now the trunk will now sprout all sorts of anxious thoughts from it. Like, what if I have a panic attack at the store? Should I take a pill before I go? Maybe I should call my husband. Is my breathing normal right now? Oh no, I can feel something happening, and hundreds and hundreds of other variations. So what we can do is we can either use, coping mechanisms to try to trim all of the tiny branches one by one to temporarily forget that they are there, or we could save ourselves a lot of time and effort and just go ahead and chop the freaking trunk of the tree down, right? So we don't have to focus on 100 different anxious thoughts a day for the rest of our lives just to get through the day, right? It's a silly plan. All we really need to do is number one, identify every anxiety causing belief or a rule, either way, same meaning, different word. Number two, we need to eliminate the unwinnable rules. And number three, we need to retrain the brain to follow a winnable set of rules by default. That is it. That's all we have to do. So for Sydney, what that meant was rewiring her subconscious to basically look like it did before the anxiety and panic attacks were there. And making sure that we updated it a little bit to be in line with the future that she really wanted for herself. So we retrained her brain to no longer require these things that were not possible for her to obtain in order to feel calm. And we rewired it to automatically focus on the things that were truly most important for her in her new stage of life. And so for her, what that looked like was we put love at the top again, growth second, and then number three, starting a family, and four was fun. And more importantly, what we did is we removed certainty, control, and calm from her subconscious values. So we trained the brain to stop chasing after those things compulsively. And so by doing it this way, Sydney no longer had to do any daily maintenance. She no longer had to have coping mechanisms to respond to her anxious thoughts. She didn't need to meditate because there were no thoughts to try to get rid of anymore. Okay. And again, we want to do all this in just 90 days. We want to spend years. We don't want to spend, excuse me, years on this. We don't want to spend all of this time analyzing and dissecting and ruminating. We just want to get the brain rewired and get you back to living the life that you have always wanted to, but anxiety has been keeping you from. Okay. And that rules out again all of the strategies that everyone else is teaching, right? Because remember, you don't have time for coping. You really don't. We can't put you in a position where you are constantly responding to every anxious thought that comes up. Those strategies take forever and usually don't even work after years of trying them. And if you have panic or anxiety attacks, like that is a big problem now, right? It is affecting your marriage now. It is affecting your children now. Like every anxious person tells me this. Oh, I never let my kids see that I'm anxious or upset. A news flash for you. I got to tell you, I got to be real with you. They know it's affecting them emotionally. It is. Children are more susceptible to what their parents feel, not what their parents say and do. Your kids are far more in tune with what you are feeling than you think they are. Okay, so it is affecting them and it's affecting them now. It's affecting your career and earning potential now, right? It's affecting your sleep now. Your coworkers, spouse, kids, family, friends, they all need you to be at your best when? Not later. Now is when they need that, right? You don't have time to spend a lot of time hoping that, 6 months from now, the therapy's finally going to kick in or, some new medication is going to start working. I mean, you could end up losing your marriage or career by then. It could end up really permanently affecting your kids by then, right? And we do not want that to happen. We cannot allow that to happen. So, how do we do that? How do we make sure that we get this absolutely dealt with? Well, imagine that you come to me, right, with this board game that you're really frustrated with. You keep trying to play it every day. You keep feeling like you're losing at it. It's not working for you. How do we, really solve the problem? Right? So you come to me, and as a board game expert, I've got this like spiffy little checklist to help you identify each and every one of the problems that's making the game unwinnable. And then what we do is we systematically rewrite the rules so your mind automatically follows the right guidelines. So we do this basically in just a few steps. Number one, we uncover your existing set of rules. Okay, after all, we can't change something that we don't even know exists in the first place, and it is impossible to do this yourself because they are subconscious. And we don't have to guess, right? We don't have to guess after seeing so many hundreds of panic and anxiety attack cases. It's really, really easy to predict and identify the underlying beliefs that are really causing the issue. Number two, we simply go through the checklist of the 7 types of rules that cause anxiety. We systematically remove all of the old rules that are causing you to feel like you're losing. Okay. Number three, we actually set you up with what you need to be able to play a winnable game, right? We set out what your new belief system needs to be in order to ensure that you absolutely get the life that you desire. And then fourth, we use conditioning strategies, not coping strategies, but conditioning strategies to train the brain to adopt the new rules by default. So you don't have to even think about it anymore. Okay, that's what we do. And there's a couple of reasons why this is awesome, like why this makes your life so much easier and so much better than trying the other ways. Firstly, it's a proven process, right? I've been teaching this successfully and consistently for 8 years, and it's why we become an industry leader. And people are starting to take notice on this. So here's a quote from Molecular Psychiatry: "Studies support that anxiety is a learned response, and it can be unlearned through brain retraining techniques." Okay, a quote from University of College London is, "Our research shows that with the right tools, the brain can be conditioned to respond differently to anxiety, enabling long-term relief." Okay, this is also awesome because it takes you from deeply anxious to anxiety-free in just a matter of a few months. So even with extreme anxiety, it's really just a matter of identify, eliminate, rewire. Okay. And rewiring your subconscious beliefs is something that you've been doing your whole life anyway, but you've just never really known how to do it intentionally. So after all, you weren't born with the belief of, I have to be completely certain and in control of everything that I think, feel, and that happens around me. Okay. You never have to worry about managing your anxious thoughts ever again because you're dismantling the underlying beliefs causing them in the first place. It's also awesome because there's no band-aid solutions, no dredging up tons of drama from the past, no talking in circles, no uncomfortable exposure, no excessive use of willpower, no more repression. Rather than feeling like you're adding a lot of things onto your to-do list just to try to manage your mental health and get through the day, now you're actually like letting things go. It's like finding all of the pebbles in your shoe and removing them instead of just taking painkillers to be able to walk, right? So this method also is great because it doesn't make you reliant on a therapist or a prescription or anyone else, right? You now are playing the game of life from the inside out, where you are in charge of how you feel instead of the outside in, where you require things outside of your control to go a certain way in order to feel okay, right? So you learn a set of skills that you will never forget. It's really cool. You become immune to relapse because you now know how to keep from adopting any limiting subconscious beliefs in the future, which is really awesome. You can teach this to your spouse, to your kids. We have people all the time who break generational cycles of their mental health issues. So rather than the vicious cycle of anxiety, right, you now tap into the virtuous cycle where everything continues to improve. Right, Sydney was able to start excelling in her studies of higher education without the anxiety in her way. And a little over a year after she fully used our method to recover, she and her husband had their first child, which was really, really awesome to see. That's happened many times because the anxiety was no longer making her worried about being able to dedicate the time and energy she needed to for her kid. So, do you see how powerful this is? Right. So now imagine the relief that would come from eliminating all of the anxiety causing beliefs you have collected over the years. Imagine what would finally be possible. Now, what most people don't realize is that every anxiety causing subconscious belief is almost like an emergency brake being pulled in your vehicle, right? So you keep trying to jam on the gas to get what you want in life, but you perpetually feel held back or stuck. But you have no idea what is holding you back because it is subconscious, which is so, frustrating. Right. So now our copycats always mess up the subconscious belief identification piece as well as the elimination and replacement piece. I've never seen somebody get it right. And what that means is they end up providing surface level strategies that simply help people respond to and manage their thoughts rather than keep them from coming back in the first place, right? And that creates a lifetime of coping. So I want you to understand that if you do this the right way, this has worked to not only keep myself anxiety free for 15 years, ever since I was hospitalized, but it has worked for the past 8 years. I've been doing this professionally, 612 clients just like you. And it's going to continue to keep working for another 8 years because the human brain does not change, right? I've done this with clients as young as 13, as old as 84, people who've been struggling with panic and anxiety attacks for 3 months, all the way up to 30 some odd years, right? It doesn't matter how long you've struggled one bit, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what kind of anxiety you're dealing with either. Most people aren't dealing with just panic or anxiety attacks, but that doesn't really matter, right? We can always root out the beliefs that are causing the problem and that are unique to each person. So if you've been, really looking for, if you've been looking, at all these coping strategies and this feel good content out there, but it leaves you feeling kind of empty, like there's a piece missing. Maybe it leaves you thinking like, God, I don't want to deal with this forever. I just want to be normal again. And can someone please just give me something tangible and common sense that I can implement right away? Then I'm telling you, there is a way to get your brain to feel content and think positively by default in just about 12 weeks without having to rely on ineffective coping mechanisms and without being dependent on anything or anyone long term. And that's why I've been in business for 8 years and why we have the best track record of results in the entire industry. We do not get sucked into the fads. We don't get sucked into the trends. We don't try to hack the social media algorithm, and we do not prioritize clicks and views over transformation. We have built our entire methodology on what does not change, and that is human psychology. And we make our clients feel taken care of, from start to finish, and that's how we're able to take them from feeling deeply anxious on day one to automatically feeling content and thinking positively by default in just 90 days or less. So, right now, you do absolutely have a choice. You can keep trying to do these coping mechanisms that don't work, that you don't like, and that you've already been trying for who knows how long, right? You can keep doing the same thing and hoping that something changes when, I mean, the whole definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and hoping something changes. You can keep hoping something changes on its own, but we all know that hope is just not really a strategy at all. It's delegating the responsibility and the power to something or someone else instead of you reclaiming the ability to be in control of where your life and your mental health is going. The only way to solidify and be totally certain that you can have your mental health where you want it to be and to make sure you are the one in control of how you think and how you feel is using the method I've shown you today. You can also, rationalize that now isn't the right time to do this. This is a common thing people do And what you will end up doing is allowing yourself to kick back onto autopilot where all of your current patterns take over. And before you know it, it's another 12 months or more. It's going to disappear really quickly. I mean, after all, when is the right time to eliminate panic and anxiety attacks from your life? What in the world could be of a higher priority than making sure that you can actually just properly function in your day-to-day life? What in the world could possibly be a higher priority than that? The answer is always now, right? And when, in terms of the question of when is the right time to do this, the answer is always now. I mean, hell, it is only your life we are talking about, right? I mean, 12 months from now is certainly going to occur. Where are you going to end up 12 months from now is the thing to understand. You're never going to get those 12 months back. So, and if you really want to finally get the mental health you deserve, get the mental health that not only you deserve, but that's completely obtainable and that hundreds have already claimed. We are totally happy to help you, right? Because I had a mentor once who said to me, I came to him and I said, like, gosh, I feel like I should be able to figure this out. And he said to me, listen, Ty, your your nose is only 1 inch away from your mouth, but you still need somebody else to tell you when your breath stinks. Right. And I'll never forget that because what it made me realize is that the number one thing that keeps us stuck is blind spots. It's just a lack of perspective. It's that we haven't walked the path before and when someone else has. So why in the world would I ever spend, 10 years struggling trying to figure something out on my own when I could just borrow half an hour of somebody else's time who already knows and I could figure it out much faster. And so that changed and sped up everything in my life a lot easier. So, anyway, here's how we're happy to help you if you'd like some help and you don't want to keep spinning your wheels. Okay. I have set aside some time in the next 24 to 48 hours to speak to you personally about how you can apply these ideas for your mental health today. And basically, on the call, what we're going to do is a couple cool things. Number one, I am going to help you identify what the major subconscious beliefs are that are causing you the majority of your panic attacks and anxiety attacks. Number two, I'm going to help you identify the ones that you need to replace those with. Third, I'm also going to make sure that I help you get clear on the 2 to 3 conditioning strategies that will help you make the changes automatic. Okay. And then four, I'm going to hand you a proven roadmap to lasting recovery and relapse prevention, which is going to be really, really cool. And it is just a phone call. It's really not that long at all. I'm going to show you the exact steps that you can take to overcome the anxiety and the panic for once and for all. And I'm going to, custom make for you a roadmap to live every day with calm, peace, joy, the ability to be present for the ones you love. Okay, we're gonna do all that on the call. Pretty cool, right? And here's my goal. My goal is literally to convince you I can help you by actually helping you. Okay, fair enough. That's my big grand evil plan. I literally I don't want to sell you anything. I literally just want to help you believe in your own recovery by helping you get closer to recovery. That's what I want to do. So my promise to you is that on this call, we're going to shave years off of the learning curve to finally getting you the mental health that you desire and deserve. And I recently had a gentleman who watched a couple of my videos and then he decided to do a call with me. And afterwards, he left this comment. He said, I can't tell you how many times you have said something that I've felt on an atomic level. This is what I've been craving for years from therapy and never received. Okay. So that's very common. I hear that all the time. Like, man, where were you when I was starting to feel like this 10 years ago? So who is this for? Well, these calls are 1000% totally free, but there is a catch. Okay. Here's who this is for. Firstly, getting your panic or anxiety truly dealt with at the core must be a must. Okay. If you're comfortable staying uncomfortable, this is not for you. So this is really only for band-aid rippers, not toe dippers, right? So if you're kind of in that, I don't really know if I really need to deal with this, just don't even bother because let me just tell you right now, if you're comfortable being uncomfortable, that's the worst place to be. You're going to stay stuck. You got to get yourself a little like riled up about this a little bit in order to make the change. Okay. Number two, you must be coachable and willing to implement what I teach you because this model is so simple and so effective. Every person who implements it is going to get control of their panic and anxiety. And we do not want anybody taking up a time slot who isn't going to show up prepared, ready, on time, ready to take notes, and ready to implement, more importantly, what you are taught, because that then robs somebody else who does want to take their mental health seriously of a guaranteed change in their mental health. Okay. So just go ahead, click the button under this video to grab your spot. If you are joining with us online, if you're seeing this on a social media platform, just go ahead and type the word session below. And myself or a member of my team will reach out to you via Messenger. We'll book a call for you manually that way. But just go ahead. If you see a button below this video, just go ahead and click that. It'll take you to a little window like this. You'll be able to pick a time that works for you, and I will call you directly at that time. Okay, spaces are very limited. Calendar does fill up very fast, so go ahead, grab your spot right now. Okay, and let me just tell you right now that firstly, I'm glad you decided to hang out with me for a little while today. I know you're putting a little trust in me by taking time out of your day to learn about this method. And this method that I've shown you how to do, how to identify, eliminate, and replace all the anxiety causing beliefs in your subconscious. I mean, this is the single most important thing that you can know how to do to finally live a life without panic or anxiety. You can spend the next 5 years trying more coping mechanisms that have already been proven to be ineffective, that the science shows is ineffective, hoping that something changes on its own, or waiting for some magic moment when it feels easy and just right to tackle this. Or you can recognize that the only way you're ever going to feel more calm and more certain and more ready is to start taking baby steps towards the method that's actually going to deal with this problem. You can't live your life just simply revolving around anxiety and waiting to feel ready. It's never going to happen that way, right? The waiting to feel ready is part of the problem that has to be solved. So you have to be willing to take a step forward, even if you don't feel totally certain and ready, to make sure that you get this done. And that way we can establish your long-term independence by using this super cut and dry, simple, easy process that just gets right down to the core of the problem, and doesn't rely on crutches, band-aid solutions, roundabout passive strategies. We don't do or teach temporary pump up BS. All we teach and all we're going to teach you is rewiring the brain to think positively by default in a way that sets you up for a lifetime without panic or anxiety. So you can show up for those you love and the way that they are craving to see you show up. And it's what you deserve. It really is what you deserve. No one deserves to live a life with anxiety or panic when it is fully overcomeable. Okay. So, anyway, I'm Ty Hicks. Click the button under the video below, book the call, or leave us a message on the video in the comments, and we'll set up an appointment for you. I'll be excited to talk with you real soon. See you.